Hey everybody, welcome back to the Shield of Hope channel. This is Movie Mayhem. In case you guys haven't been tuning in, we talk about movies every Monday, although this is coming out on Wednesday because in typical fashion, we end up being late. But that's okay. We have Chase Morgan Hewlett back with us. Chase, how are you doing this evening?
Doing great. How are you, Donnie?
Not too bad. Lots of movie news to catch up on as far as like what I personally seen. So this has been a better week for me as far as seeing films. Got to see the movie Strays. I actually just uploaded the video on YouTube yesterday. So you can watch me and Hummel's reaction. We did like a card kind of style where we set it up in the dash cam of the car. We did our before and after. So that was unique in a sense. I love the thumbnail, honestly. That's the best part about it. So you can watch that if you want the full flesh reaction of the out of the theater. But I also saw the Meg yesterday as well, the Meg 2. So I'm interested to talk about that with you. But Chase, we'll start with you real quick. Did you have something that you wanted to bring up?
I have not watched any new movies this week. The only movie I watched this week was Madagascar 3 that came out over 10 years ago. And the crazy thing is I've never seen it. So I was like, okay, well, Kat and I, my fiance and I, we've been watching movies, and cartoons are a thing that we watch because they're innocent and fun, and you don't have any of the violence or sex. Sometimes it's just nice to watch a kid show. So we started Madagascar and kind of went through. So that's the only movie I watched this week that was actually newish for me, even though it came out 10 years ago. But there's a show coming out on Netflix. Now I know you're not a big anime fan, but they turned this anime into a live action. One Piece came out with an 8-episode series or season, I guess, live action on Netflix. And anime fans, I'm sure you know One Piece. That is a very long, dreadful show. It's either you really love it or you can't stand it. There's a lot of filler episodes, which filler episodes, from my knowledge, are episodes that they're just kind of putting in there just to do it. Because you can skip them. Like, okay, there's like a whole bunch. You can skip like 60 episodes in One Piece and still, be okay. So, but I'm excited for this live action. One Piece is a very odd show. And Donnie, I recommend when you're done with this podcast that you just go and watch a scene from the anime. It's very odd. It's about pirates and a young pirate named Luffy that wants to be the pirate king of the pirates. And it's a very odd show. You don't really watch it to learn something. It's a very odd show, I guess you could say. And if you're starting out in anime, this is the wrong anime to watch. You got to start small because you don't want to dive into the deep end with this one because it has over 1,000 episodes. It came out in 1999 and it's still making episodes. But Netflix came out with a live action, and at first I was a little skeptical about it. I was like, okay, they can't come up with a new idea for nothing. But from what I've seen of the ratings, it's actually quite decent. You're obviously going to have the big fans that hate it no matter what, kind of like what happened with Star Wars. Like, you just have the mega fans. But overall, it seems like the show actually does a decent job. So I haven't seen it yet, but on our next meeting, Donnie, I am going to watch it. And I ask that you watch at least one episode of it, even if it's just the pilot. Just watch one. That way you kind of know the characters and what I'm talking about. Just do that for me.
I will watch one episode of that. Promise you, Chase, by the next time we have Movie Mayhem, as long as you watch the first episode of Ahsoka.
Ahsoka, deal. I can do that.
Okay.
I can do
I know it's an easy trade-off, at least it sounds like it, but also off topic real quick. I actually thought about you and Kat the other day. So when we walked into the Meg, we saw a poster for Paw Patrol. And I was like, well, it's close to Bluey. So I was like, they'll probably go see it.
They're gonna make a Bluey movie one day, and we're going to see it. Like,
it's gonna be live action, it's gonna look like cats. It'll be great.
oh, it'd be awful. That'd be so bad.
And that is how we ruin Bluey for everybody. We dress him up like the movie Cats.
And I'm upset he's spaghetti now. That just hurts.
I'm sure if you took, how Christian, when we were down filming your film, how Christian brought out the AI app?
Yeah.
Tell him to look that up, Bluey, but live action like Cats, and see what it comes up with, the horrific images in which
I will do that. I will do that. Shout out to Christian Solomonson, by the way.
So getting back to the One Piece, I would love to see, and there's one thing on TikTok that I've been watching. I've been watching this guy, again, don't remember his name, but he does a lot of studio pitches. I think you might have saw them too. I think we shared like reels of studio pitch, like for Jurassic Park and Star Wars and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I would love to know what the studio pitch is for One Piece. If you're saying there's 60 filler episodes, I would love to know that one. Well, at the end of the day, the first episode and last episode matter, but everything in between just doesn't.
Yeah, it's a very odd show. The first time I watched it was actually in a tattoo shop. My fiance was getting a tattoo and I sat there and I was watching it, and I was just staring at the screen, and I watched like 20 minutes of the show and I was like, what is this? Am I high? Like, what's going on with me? And we watched another one and I was like, no, it's just a bizarre show. I'm not saying it's bad. It's just, and I'm not a big anime fan. As much as I do talk about it and do know some of it, I don't watch anime all the time. So I usually watch Studio Ghibli. That's kind of as far as anime as I get. But just watching that show, it's like, this is odd. And it's kind of odd to like, okay, it piques my attention to a point because, he has that yellow hat and then he flings his arms and he's Mr. Fantastic and just flings his arms around. You're like, huh? And then the bad guy's head falls off and it rolls around and then the head starts talking still. And you're like, what is happening here? So, and I don't know much about One Piece. I'm not the person to go to figure out what One Piece is all about or any of that. I just know certain things about it. But from just watching the trailer of the live action, they casted really well, it looks like, and it just looks like it's a good adaptation of the original anime. So I'm excited to see it.
I mean, the only thing that I could think about where Netflix has really failed, and again, this is just me trying to look back in recent memory. Typically, when they brought live action stuff out, like The Witcher, they took it from video game to the first two seasons of The Witcher, everybody liked. At least the first season, everybody enjoyed. So I feel like Netflix has a good track record. Other than what was the one with the bio weapons? Was it Resident Evil? Is that the series they did recently? Resident Evil Afterlife. I don't remember what it was, but there was one that they adapted the first year into a series that people didn't like. But I feel like Netflix actually has a good track record of at least the first season for when they kickstart these live actions. Pretty good. So
Yeah,
we'll see.
they do have decent shows. Netflix does have decent shows, but I feel like their shows are better than their movies. They have a better and TV shows are a big thing now. Back in the golden age of Hollywood, it was kind of an insult to be casted on a show. That was just like, wow, am I that low to you? But now it's like a blessing to be on a show because you have a consistent job, like Game of Thrones. You have a consistent job for 8 seasons. And so a lot of shows recently, and people, it's funny how shows are meant to be watched like through a bigger period of time, but people just binge watch it. So they watch it as if it's a movie. It's just like a 8-hour movie and whatnot. Like I don't binge watch shows. The only shows I ever binge watched was Trailer Park Boys, but that's really easy to binge watch. It's like 20 minutes of just dumb humor and you can just kind of watch them over and over again. But these type of shows that are 30 minutes or more, I like watching them at a distant pace. That way you can kind of grasp everything and you don't get it all at once. You kind of ponder, what's going to happen next? That's what I did with Game of Thrones because I watched every episode the night it came out. And so all the surprises that happened, I had to wait a whole week or a whole year. Like I had to wait a whole year to find out Jon Snow was not dead. And that was brutal because that was one of my favorite characters. So, I like how shows do that. But I also like just watching a movie and being done with it in 2 to 3 hours rather than having to watch a whole month's worth of a show.
When did that change? So you talked about the golden era of Hollywood being like, and I guess I'll put it this way. Yeah, actors, I guess, felt like it's below them to be on a TV series, but like they also felt like, I guess, being in TV series was meant for like lower quality actors to begin with. It wasn't like it was like a bad thing to be cast necessarily. It was just that was like where the quality was. It was like the minor leagues in baseball. The minor leagues were the TV shows, the major leagues were the Hollywood films. So when did that change? Because again, we can talk about the superhero comments made by Spielberg, by Scorsese back in 2016-ish. And I was trying to look up articles, but I swear somebody like a Tom Hanks, and again, I don't want to throw Tom Hanks' name on it if it's not him, but somebody to the caliber of Tom Hanks spoke out about that in the 2010 era about still feeling like the movies were where the best actors were. So there's still like some tension between like TV show actors and like film actors. Not nearly as much,
Yeah.
but there's still tension.
Well, back then, you had like shows weren't really what they were like they are now. Like back then, they were more like, because remember back then they had the rabbit ears and the TV, and you only got to see that episode once, and that was it. And they made it a story in 30 to 45 minutes, let's just say, or 45 minutes to an hour. Like I'm going to use Gunsmoke as an example. It's like the longest running TV show. It went for over 30 years. And that actor started out in small films, and James Arness, he started out in these smaller films, and he wasn't doing really much. And then John Wayne introduced him to somebody that got him the part as Marshal Matt Dillon as the Gunsmoke. And then he had a career for the rest of his life, pretty much into the 80s. So I would say the 70s and 80s, you kind of started with like the serious shows, like the Westerns, the Dark Shadows, and then you kind of got into the detective, and then you got into the sitcom where they sat in front of audience laughing. And then it kind of got into more, the storyline was spread out into 8 to 10 episodes rather than like one singular episode. Like Gunsmoke, you don't have to watch it in order. You can pick any episode out of a hat and watch it, and you learn everything in that episode, and that's it. Sometimes characters change, but other than that, and that wasn't because of the show. That was because the actor didn't want to do it anymore or something. They had to recast and do all that stuff. So I think that it gradually changed in the late 1990s, 2000s. I think we started going towards having a story go longer than 45 minutes. And it kind of works out that way, because some of these stories, like Stranger Things, let's just use that can't be a movie. And if it is, it's not a good movie. It has to be a series, because you're developing so much in the characters and the story and the mystery and all that. You have to have it a series. You have to space it out into 8 to 10 episodes. But sometimes they have shows that they're trying to make a series where it's really not. There's a show on Netflix called The Watcher, and it's kind of a mystery theater. It's thriller. It's based off a true story of these new people who moved into a town in New Jersey, kind of close to where you're at, I guess. And they start getting these weird letters in the mailbox, and they just got so many weird, threatening letters. It was not like a full-on threat, but it was odd enough to kind of scare them that they just moved out of the house. And they made a whole series on it and kind of elaborated on it. It's producer Ryan Murphy who did the Dahmer series. And that shouldn't have been a series, in my opinion, because it was drug out to 8 episodes, and there were some episodes where it just didn't need to be, So I don't know if that answers your question, but
No, it does. And the interviewer side of me is probably going to take over the journalistic side of me and continue to ask you more questions in the sense of what do you think made, because again, taking everything that you just talked about, why do you think that TV shows and series like only last, like Stranger Things is coming up on season 5, correct? Somewhere like that, season 5.
yeah.
And that, we're getting close to the end of Stranger Things. I don't know if this is the final season. I don't know when it's coming, but it's on its way out.
Yeah, this is the final season 5.
The sweet spot, everybody says, and you can talk to filmmakers of TV shows, you can talk to showrunners. They say that 3 seasons is a sweet spot. If you get over 3 seasons as a TV show, you're good. But how come? And I know that the first one I'm about to mention is a sitcom, and sitcoms have been around like soap operas for a long, long running time, like, Days of Our Lives or whatever would be showing on ABC when you just turn it on. But what made things like Gunsmoke or The Golden Girls back then live on longer? Like it feels like they had like a TV show run for a decade plus.
Well, I know why Gunsmoke lasted longer, and it's people like my dad and probably your dad who like to watch a show that the good guy wins. There's no sex, there's no, bloody graphic violence or any of that stuff. It's just a good show. Good always wins. And it's nice to see that, especially in that time era, because that came out in the 50s and went through all the way to the 80s. They made some movies out of it, but you you see this character grow, you see how they are. Matt Dillon's a very likable character. He's really big, he has a booming voice, he owns a room. I'm sure women thought he was attractive back then. So you have all these elements, and then he always won. And he went through his trials and whatnot, and he got shot and everything, but he won. And when you have likable characters and you develop them well, then you have a show that continues on. Like the Golden Girls. You had, I think there were 4 or 3. I think there were 3.
I think there were 3, but I think there was like a mother or mother-in-law that might have been the 4.
That might have been the 4th, actually. So 3 or 4. You have these ladies who are all funny, but they're funny in their own way. And I know one was really sarcastic, one kind of slept around, and Betty White was the dumb blonde that didn't know anything. And so you have these different characters that kind of, live together, and they collaborate in a funny way. It's the same with Coach. Coach is an old show from the 1990s, and I'm sure you've seen that before. You have Coach Hayden, who is this angry male coach, like any man ever, any boomer out in the world. My dad, your dad, they're all like this guy. So you can relate to that already. And then you have his assistants who are, Jeffrey Van Dyke and Bill Fagerbakke. I forgot his name, but he plays Patrick in SpongeBob. And his assistant coaches are just the dumbest thing on earth. So you kind of have that kind of, clashing of he has to deal with this and whatnot. But I think if you have likable characters, you can have a show run on for a long time. And I think that's what made Gunsmoke such a, successful series.
I can fully agree with morals and plot and story and character development as far as the older films. If you would have asked me this again, if you would have asked Donnie at like around high school graduation level, I would have told you that like, no, the films nowadays have better plots and stories, plus visuals. Of course, we're not going to argue that really. But since 2016, I do have to say the older films kind of stand the test of time, because since this new age, and whenever you want to constitute this new age of starting, we've lost the script, the plot, that the character development in these series has kind of been thrown out the window. But I do wonder if having a multitude of shows and things to watch, like different streaming services and different channels, because think about what was on TV back then. I do feel like they only had a certain amount of options to watch too. So if Gunsmoke was on, if Golden Girls was on, that was their go-to, because lack of channels, lack of like stuff, it would just became a cult classic kind of favorite. It was either that or the news sometimes.
Yeah, and you only had certain amount of times to watch it. Like my mother used to say that she used to watch It's a Wonderful Life every Christmas, and you had to watch it at that time or you wouldn't see it for another year. And now we can watch that movie any month of the year. So it's more valuable. Movies were back then, because you didn't get to see them that much. Like you watch an episode of Gunsmoke and you might never see that episode again in your lifetime if you were living in the 50s. So maybe that was part of it as well.
And I did say, I don't know what the commercial and the advertising was like back then, but I gotta tell you, when you watch TV Land and you watch all these reruns and stuff like that, the lack of commercials, I do love it. I hope it was like that back then, because it needs to return to that right now.
Yeah, it was like 30 seconds. Yeah. Definitely. And their commercials were so much better. The guy spoke right up to the mic like this and was selling some type of beef or whatever. And I don't know, it was just what if you listen to the soundtrack of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, that's what they were like. Because in the middle of the soundtrack, you just have random like commercials for mug root beer, drink it. That was it. That was the commercial. And like, oh, okay, we will. So
and was that the era that they could drink on screen and advertise alcohol, or they couldn't, between alcohol and cigarettes? There was an era back then where they weren't allowed to have it on screen and like promote it.
I do not know, but everyone smoked cigarettes back then. Everyone.
Yeah.
Babies came out smoking cigarettes. Like everyone smoked a cigarette, but that's because they advertised it that way.
Parents had cancer, so the babies came out with cancer. It was the same thing.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, but I mean, there are things to like about the old days. But it's fascinating too that like series like back then series went on forever, and you could say low budget, you could say whatever, but it's fascinating that the series that we have right now can't last nearly as long. Like you see it like just falling off. So, but again, that's probably a bigger, broader topic that we have to get more people involved in to really get everybody's opinion. But yeah, it's fascinating.
And
Um,
you can connect to these characters too, so that kind of helps. Like the Waltons, for example. I remember watching that when I was a kid, and we always connected to the Waltons because we were from the country and we didn't have a lot of money. And so that's just another thing you can think of. Good family TV sells a lot better than rated R stuff. But it seems like Hollywood thinks rated R sells better because you see more rated R films and more violent sexual films than you do kid shows, which is why my fiance and I like to go and watch Bluey or these kid shows. Because if you think about it, there are more families out there than you think. And they did a study one time, I don't know where it was, some college, and they asked people what was like what did they want more of, and they said family movies. So we kind of steered away from that.
yeah, specifically Disney steered away from that too, which is fascinating because Disney's target market is children and families, and they've gone
Yep.
completely anti their target market, which is fascinating.
Well, they got
Um,
political, so
but you know who didn't go anti their target market? The Meg 2. Because if anybody was interested in watching the Meg 2, you went and you got what you were anticipating, I guess. Unlike Strays, in my opinion. But I won't go into Strays because you can watch the video on the channel earlier. But honestly, Chase, I don't know if you have any plan on seeing the Meg 2. Do you?
probably at home. I don't think I'll go to theaters for it. I might go see Expendables 4. I just saw the trailer for it and it actually kind of looks decent. So I might do that one.
I told you. Listen, anything with Stallone, and I don't know Schwarzenegger's in. I haven't looked at the cast yet. Sometimes when you have action, and this was a nice, pleasant surprise because I believe it was Expendables 2. Chuck Norris made an appearance in. Sometimes I do enjoy not going to the films and seeing the whole cast that's in it. Because I think sometimes when they release the cameo appearances, that's why you kind of like stay off the online, the web per se, when all these spoilers come out to all these films and like the cameos and so like you don't ever want to type in anything because you see who's in it. It's like, oh, it's like a spoiler. So I'm not really
Yeah.
looking to see who's in this film because I kind of want to be surprised which Hollywood stars they kind of draw in.
Yeah, Megan Fox is in it. I didn't realize she would be in it, but she doesn't seem like a tough girl to me. But
Has
now
she
to come
has
over
she
and
played in any films? And I know the answer is probably yes, but I really don't know. Since Transformers.
Jennifer's Body,
Okay, when did that come out?
2010. Correct me if I'm wrong, people,
Was
but I think
Trans
2010.
when was Transformers with her?
All right, so the original Transformers was '07, and then Revenge of the Fallen was like '09.
Boy, that seems like I mean it seems like a long time ago, but it seems like it's short. So that's crazy.
For me, it feels like forever because I was a freshman in high school in '09, and I remember when that movie came out. And then she wasn't in the other one, and Jennifer's Body came out 2010. And then after that, I don't know what she did. I'm not as big of Megan Fox fan as others that I have known in the past, but um I don't know any movies where she's a fighter, because Expendables is kind of like the fighter Ronda Rousey. Is that her name? I forgot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Those type of women. She never seemed like a fighter to me. But I mean, she was a vampire, so maybe that kind of helps.
We'll also see because just because she's casted in here and you think like action, there's no reason why she can't be a villain per se. Because sometimes you don't need brute strength to be a villain, you just need the brains. So it'll be interesting to see. Maybe she's like that tech nerd too. Because
Yeah.
that's a possibility as well.
Or she's in it because she's good looking. And that's something Hollywood does
Well,
too.
that would be number one. Yes. But again, I'm sure, and I haven't actually seen Megan Fox in how long, so I can't even tell you that. Like, I look at Transformer days like Megan Fox, like, oh yeah, she looked good, but you might need more makeup now. I have no idea.
I don't know. I do not know.
But getting back to the Meg 2, I guess I'll do my Meg 2 review here real quick. Um, so I will compare it very much so, and this might turn a lot of people off by what I'm about to say, but I went to go see the movie 65 earlier this year with Adam Driver and the dinosaurs and 65 million years before Earth, which if anybody knows, or I mean, spoiler, but a certain event happened 65 million years before humans or whatever, 65 million years ago. So, when he's escaping everything that's falling down around him, literally, that film, even though, yes, I understand it didn't have a plot and it could be perceived as boring, I actually fairly enjoyed. So the Meg was very much so the same thing as 65. But when I say why it works and why 65 worked, in my opinion, it's because it had a fast pacing and it wasn't a very long film. So you went for the action, you went to go see these prehistoric animals, and then it was over. And you're like, okay. I was entertained for the hour and a half, and I think it worked. Unlike the new Jurassic World, and I was actually talking to my sister because she went literally hours before, wasn't planned at all. She actually Snapchatted me a picture, and she's like, in the movies watching the Meg, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna take Sean into that like 2 hours later, and I was like, let me know how it is. She enjoyed it. Her husband hated it, which understandable. He hated the whole trailer, so it doesn't shock me.
What does he know?
Yeah, what does he know, Steven? uh, but it's just one of these things where, honestly, I was so disappointed in the last Jurassic Park, and plus having an extended time frame on the Jurassic Park movie and balancing a whole bunch of different like plots, because you had like the different sets of characters, whether it was nostalgic or not, they were going back and forth. So this film didn't, or that film didn't work as good as the Meg did, because the Meg, even if it was bringing people together from the last film and like different prehistoric creatures as well as the Megs, and a certain plots. And my sister said that, yeah, there was very similar creative minds behind both Jurassic World and this one. And I was like, yeah, they kind of ripped off some ideas, but this one was executed better. And I was actually like, okay. And I enjoyed it. Like I said, it's kind of like the fun version of Jaws. You think about Jaws came out in the 70s, 80s?
75.
75. Okay. So when Jaws came out, people flooded to the beaches and the pools to go see this film and be like scared to death too. I view the Meg as just a nice, friendlier, even though there was blood and guts, but friendlier version of seeing Jaws like it would be in 75.
I love that the Meg is friendlier than Jaws, and that shark is so much bigger. Jaws is horrifying. If you actually think about when it came out and think about how they filmed it and everything, that's a horrifying film. Like, it's just, for the time it came out, it's just and it's PG. That's the funny thing. If you look it up, it is a PG movie.
Do PG movies even exist anymore?
Probably not.
Like, I feel like
why or rated R.
Even your Bluey and Paw Patrol, I'm sure it's gonna be like PG-13. I don't know what the reason would be, but I don't know what, like, even like rated R films, I feel like the rated R rating is slightly moving to like, you need more of a certain thing. Like, we're getting desensitized as an audience. So I feel like the rated R rating is going, but I don't know where the PG and was there even a G? There was a G at one time too, wasn't there? Just guidance.
There is a G.
And I think that's completely gone. So
who needs guidance anymore?
Yeah. America.
That's a
but like, that's all kind of gone. So I'm just wondering, like, I don't know when the last time I saw like a G or PG rated film was, as far as like that rating.
I think PG is more popular than G, because usually they say Y, but Y is for really young, like Cocomelon young. And then you have G, which is for The Adventures of Milo and Otis. I don't know if you know that movie, but I grew up with that movie. And then you have PG and go on from there.
You made me feel really old, the fact that I didn't know the first reference. Cocomelon?
That's a newer show. That's a terrible.
Cocomelon?
It is terrible. And you should watch Bluey instead, kids and parents. Show your kid Bluey, not Cocomelon.
Chase Morgan Hewlett approves.
Really, it's a fact. Cocomelon is just too much. Like, there's those kid shows that are just like mind numbing, and you want to beat your head against a nail. And then you have the kid shows like Bluey. I'm a Bluey fan. I'm sorry, but when you have those shows that you can like enjoy, and they actually, you know, teach a lesson to the parents, not just the kid. And then they talk about like subjects that kids go through, like post-traumatic distress and the stuff like that. And you're like, wow, they actually talked about that in a show. And there was one episode where they talked, I guess the mother of Bluey had a miscarriage, and it was never talked about. But it doesn't, like, one of the kids is pretending they're pregnant, and then they pop the balloon because it's a balloon in them, and the mother kind of had a quick like panic attack. Not panic attack, but she like her husband grabbed her hand, meaning like they remember a time where they actually lost a kid. So when you focus on like issues like that in a kid's show, the kids aren't going to know what that means, but the adults are going to be like, oh wow, that's good. So watch Bluey.
Watch Bluey, it says.
Watch Bluey, guys.
So Chase, thank you for joining me, even though it was a late Movie Mayhem and we're getting up on a Wednesday. Chase, thank you for joining me again on Movie Mayhem. Where can people find you at?
Well, you can find me on Instagram at Chase Morgan Hewlett. I also have a production company called True Light Pictures. That is at True Light Pictures. And Donnie and I do a podcast called The Golden Review, where we talk about old films like Gunsmoke and all that stuff. And that's at The Golden Review on Spotify.
And would you like to give them a sneak peek of who we're going to be talking about next on The Golden Review?
We're going to be talking about an actor from the 1930s named James Cagney. He is the Joe Pesci of the 30s, a big gangster actor. And, you know, dynamite comes in small packages. So when you watch him, you'll think of that term. And yeah, so James Cagney. If you're a big James Cagney fan, join us on Spotify.
Thank you guys for watching. Tune in to more episodes. If you like Movie Mayhem now, you can watch Movie Mayhem back then. Our episodes really don't age too much. You can go back and watch the last few episodes and be like, yes, everything is correct in what we talk about, because we are never wrong. Thank you guys for tuning in. This has been Movie Mayhem with Chase Morgan Hewlett and Donnie Shields.